Journalist Melinda Ferguson is joining me in studio. Today we're going to be chatting about her brand new book, Crashed, How Trashing a Ferrari Saved My Life. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh no, I'm good.
It's good to see you here, that you finally made it. Everyone who comes into the studio always talks about the mission it is to get here.
I know. So I didn't crash the car, but it's a tiny little Toyota Aygo, so at least it wasn't anything too expensive.
Exactly. After that infamous moment that we actually start at in the book. The book starts with your crash in 2013, and that really was the beginning of what you kind of describe as a life crash. It was very metaphorical, wasn't it?
I think sometimes when you have a near-death experience, and it really was a near-death experience, we were really blessed not to, be hurt or be injured because there were 4 of us in the car. But after that, my whole life just unwound into a complete mess, as it does when you crash a 3.2 million rand car. And all the financial stuff, the work stuff, I was getting into a lot of trouble at work. My relationship, I was writing a book on Oscar Pistorius. So everything seemed to come tumbling down. But later, as one is lucky enough to do often, to look back at what's going on in your life, I realized that this crash was almost like an inevitable thing, that I needed to take stock of my life and what I'd been doing and where I'd been going in my life. And so, yeah, I mean, the crash, I suppose, it is symbolic of just a whole lot of stuff that gets crashed and then slowly gets rebuilt again.
Now, I know you've spoken about this a whole lot. You've had to relive it through writing the book. Speaking about it so much, have you realized anything new about what's happened that you didn't realize was happening when it was happening?
One of the things I think I have realized is how much more power you have when you own your own story. Because for about a year, I felt really like I had to hide away from the story. There was a lot of high-profile stuff. There was Sunday Times. There was a lot of social media. Lots of unkind things being said within the motoring industry, without the, outside of the motoring industry. People just decided to make up their own stories. So, I'm a recovering addict. I'd been 14 years clean and sober when the accident happened. But I mean, there were lots of people who said I'd relapsed on crack, I was drunk. And so there were all these those games where the frog keeps popping up. So I had all these things happening and I felt very victimized, I must say, by all of this stuff and unable to engage with it because I was also under kind of a disciplinary where I was not allowed to actually speak about it. So my hands were tied, my mouth was gagged, and finally, when I started owning, by writing it, and when I finally published it a few weeks ago, actually, because it's quite new, I suddenly felt that sense of, now this is yours. They can say whatever they like, but you've owned your story. And I think that often happens with me particularly. I like to own my own scandal, my own trauma, and then in a way you get a little bit more of a rhino skin around your heart, because it can be very hurtful when you are being attacked.
Now, you're speaking about those comments by strangers, by your peers, by people in the industry. How did you deal with that? I mean, in the book, we see that you're very emotional and also quite dramatic. How did you deal with that, especially seeing the fact that you couldn't really speak about it or respond?
I had to learn to close my ears. I mean, a lot of my good friends said, don't go to Facebook. Don't go and look at these things. But of course, later, I didn't actually. I listened to them for about 6-7 months, but then slowly I started feeling a bit better and I started thinking, what did they say about me? Then I wanted to go and sue everybody and that. But that never really actually brings you your sanity or serenity back. So, I mean, it's clear in the book. I go and I book myself into a clinic for a post-traumatic, kind of almost nervous breakdown. It just got too much for me. I think the post-traumatic stress from the accident, all those other things, love problems, all sorts of, personal things that had just come crashing down. So I took what I call now a pause from life. And luckily I had medical aid at the time, so I could take my 70 grand clinic stay and actually luxuriate in a safe space where I could actually just have help and support and like a lot of psychological counseling because I really needed it.
Now, you don't often think about checking into a clinic for something like post-traumatic stress or any kind of anxiety disorder. You often associate it with rehab.
Yeah, drugs or something, yeah.
Did you have to change the way you thought about it mentally, especially since you were recovering?
Yeah, and you know what, my biggest fear was that I would meet other addicts and they'd think I'd relapsed. And then the gossip machine would go into a different place. So I actually literally told my publisher of the magazine I was working for, and I told, I think, one friend, and I like slunk into this place. Lots of shame, lots of, oh my God, what will they do when they, you know, what will people think? And that's also one of those things I've started learning is like, you know, screw what people think. You have to sometimes rescue yourself and your life, and you've got to forget what all the kind of preconceptions around clinics are. So yeah, I had to really I think I was so desperate that I actually almost didn't have a choice. But it was very hard for me thinking of what people would say or what they would think of me because I'd gone and kind of been so stuffed up that I had to go into a clinic.